Hello, welcome back to this tutorial. So in the last video tutorial on this series, what we did was we were able to create the a simple post API for us to post data into our tags table. Okay, so we're able to push in the title and the description. We used Postman to test whether the API was working successfully, and then we realized that it was working. So when we click on send, we push this data into into the database. So when we check, we can see that we have workshop tags, and it is what we have here. Okay, workshop tags and all this. If I change this to, let's say, another task, okay, and then I post, I should see another task, and then I get a response saying successful. So now I can just go and then check. Okay, so when I do that, I can check in my task and I can see another task added here. So that means our post request was working successfully. Our post was working successfully. So this is working. Now how do we send a request from the app? Okay, so this time we are still going to use the scope model here. Okay, so it is a similar approach for fetching the data or the tags and then the to-dos from the database. Okay, so I'm just going to write a similar function here or method here, which is like add tags. So void add tags. Okay, and this time we are not going to do http.get. We are going to do a post, but we need a try catch to catch any errors that we will have in our http request. Okay, so we will come here and then do what, try catch, and then we put the catch here. We have the error, we catch the error, and then we can just go ahead and print the error, and then we can have this here. So now we have to end this with a semicolon here, and that is it. So what are we going to put here? We are going to put an http dot post request here. Okay, and with the post request is quite different from the get request. We will need the URL. Okay, and then URL, and then we will also need a body. Okay, so the URL is the endpoint where we pass in the data, okay, to our PHP database. So when we come here, we can just copy this endpoint here because that we've tested and we realize that it's working now. So now when we come here, we can put it here and then paste this code there. I mean this URL there. Now we need to pass in the body. Now the body that we pass in it, we will pass a map body to it. So the map will behave like a JSON, and then we can send it to our PHP um, database or PHP API. Okay, so we need a body here, and the body is supposed to be a map. Okay, so if I open a curly bracket like this, open and close cur- curly brackets here, then I know that this is going to be a map. Okay, so I'll quickly close this. I mean, create a map here and then say map string dynamic. Okay, so the keys will be what in the form of a string, and then the values will have dynamic values. Okay, so I'll be like my data to send. I'll just name it that way, data to send, and I'll put the map here. And we know that we need a title for the post, the tags. Okay, let's say awesome tags title, and then the description will also be what? Okay, we also need a description which is going to be let's say this is really an awesome task to complete, something like this, and then we have to end this with what, a semicolon here. Now, instead of you just doing this thing inside here, we can just put the name there, which is the my data to send. Okay, so with this one, when we should call this method, then we expect this data to be pushed into our hot database because we have the endpoint here. So when we do that, we know that we get a response. Okay, we're um, looking at the postman, when we send, we get a success or an error response. Okay, so I'll come back here, and with this one I'm just going to wait for the what, the response that we get from the database. So I'll do async here, and then I'll wait for the response to be final http dot response response, and then we can say response, and we await for the response. Okay, so I'll come here and then just print the response that we get from the database. So I'll say the response body, and I'm just going to display the response body for now, response.body. So how are we going to use this in our code? I mean, in our front end or our page just okay. So for now, what I'm going to do is when I go into the home page, I have a floating action button here. Okay, so the floating action button, when I click it, takes me to the tags page, and I'm supposed to add. Okay, so for now we want to just test if the add tags is working the way we want it to work. Okay, if this method is working. Okay, so I'll come here and I have to call the add tags method. So to call this, then I need to wrap the floating action button with what a scope model descendant. But if I'm going to do that, that means I'm getting multiple of what scope model descendants here, and I don't want it that way. I want this. I want to wrap the scaleful widget before if the scope model descendant, so that anything inside the scope scaleful widget will have access to the scope model. Okay, so I come here to do scope model. That's okay. I come here in the task page. You realize that the scaleful widget was wrapped before the scope model descendant, and any widget here can now use the what the model. Any widget here can now use the model. So instead of in the home page, instead of just wrapping the list view with the scope model descendant, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the code of the list view here, okay, and then delete the scope model descendant for this here, and then paste the code here again back here. But this time I'm going to wrap the whole scaffold with what the scope model descendant, so that the floating action button can have access to what the model. So let's just go and then cut the whole code, and now this time we are going to use scope model descendant here, and then with this one I can now put my build context here, and then reject child. Okay, so this is like mandatory anytime that you are using it, and then your main model should always be here. Okay, and now with this one I can just return and then bring the scaleful code here. Now if I do it this way, you can see that the error that we had for the list view is gone, because now we have access to the model again. And in this same sense, the floating action button is also having access to the model, even though we didn't wrap just the scaleful we didn't wrap the floating action button with what the scope model descendant, but we still have access to it. So if instead of moving to that page, I want to just comment this code for now, and instead I want to call the model.add tags here. Okay, because I want to test if that code is working. So when I click on this button, I want to see if the code is working. So let's just open this side. Let's open this side and see what happens. So I'll clear the console. Okay. And yes, when I come here, you can see that this is gone because I've been clicking on save, save, save so many times. And I've explained this in the last video. So don't worry about it. It's not an error. And your code is working perfectly fine. So here now I want to click on this. Okay. So I'll click it from my mobile, and then we want to see what will happen here. So when I click on it, let's see, and I get the response body success adding tags was successful. So let's go into this, and what did we add? We add awesome task title. And when I come inside here, you can see that we have not refreshed this thing. So now let's refresh and then see, and then I can see awesome task title. Okay, so we've added it successfully. Now this means that this line of code is at least working, and then we are also able to get the response. Okay, so that's working fine. So now what are we going to do here? So that means now when we go into the tax page, okay, we have to make sure that our form and everything is working. So let me just come here and then reload the app again here and show you what I mean. and then go back to the I think I've already reloaded, so now it's okay. So I have this one here. Now you can see all the tags being printed here. Now when I click on one item here, you can see I can get the tags for, I mean, the to-dos for those particular tags. Now, this is the page where we want to add the task title, the description, okay, the description here, and then we also want to add the to-dos. So this is the page where we have to post the data from before we send into our database. So in the next video tutorial, what we are going to do is we are going to make sure that this will accept the input from this the task page, and then we pass those instead of putting this static data there. We are going to make it dynamic by passing in the data from the form, and then we will send it into the database. So I will leave the video here, and I will see you in the next video tutorial.